Firstly, my cat is getting in front of my lighting. Hopefully that doesn't mess with green screening, and if it does, well, at least it'll have been funny. They release a direct for Raiders, which everybody's talking about, and I'm not going to talk about because what they also released was the patch notes for version 11.2, which is releasing June 10th. I am blanking on exactly what the timing is for that. I think it might be that's June 10th Japan time. Usually there's a transition around the evening in North America, so it might work a little bit differently for us, but it is coming soon, and here is what's going to be in it. Reduced the size of blasters, explosion, collision detection with opponents. Usually they don't start with that. Usually they start by talking about something else, but this was apparently such a big deal that even Nintendo caught onto it and fixed it in one patch. This is better than we have come to expect. We had metagames that were just completely dominated by things like Crab Tank and Snipe Rider, where just patch after patch after patch, everyone was saying these are the best weapons in the game, and they received no attention from Nintendo. But this time, it was just one patch that blew blasters up, and all of a sudden, they're scaling it back. For those who aren't aware of the issue here, blasters got a buff to their explosion radius. So the boom that goes off around that, if you're inside that circle, you're taking some kind of damage. And that got bigger. Reason for that was that they decreased the size of the player's hitbox. It became harder to aim at a player as a result of the 10.0 changes. And so, to compensate for that, they made it a little bit easier to hit them with certain weapons that would disadvantage. But they went really far with the blaster. One of the things about the blaster is that the radius increasing affects it in a bunch of different ways. Not only does it make it way easier to hit a shot, but it also makes it so that it extends the range. If we take a look here, the blaster's direct range is only about here. It's like barely more than 2 of these lines. Like, that isn't even a direct. And if you compare that to, say, a splatter shot, you can see that there's significantly more range that this weapon has. But, effectively speaking, the blaster does actually still hit this, because that radius, that blast radius, is really what we're measuring here. So, the blaster effectively outranges a weapon that, according to the crosshairs, it doesn't, because whatever that blast radius is, it's added onto the range of the weapon. That being high is not just a linear improvement in the strength of the weapon. That's something that's multiplicative. That's something that affects multiple different aspects positively when that's bigger. So that's something that definitely needed to be toned down. The custom blaster was, in pretty much everyone's lists, the strongest weapon in the entire game, and it was because of that change in 10.0. So this being rolled back makes a lot of sense. We'll open up the metagame again and really change up what's going on the front lines, and I'm curious to see how it goes. Now, blasters could still be very strong. It really depends on how much they change it by, and they haven't told us how much they're going to change it by, which is frustrating. That's something you would think, if you're going to talk about things like, you know, increasing speed of shots by approximately 5%, well, this is the most significant part of the patch, in all likelihood. Like, unless there's some bombshell below this, this is what's going to change the game the most at a competitive level. I would like to know by how much. We'll get to try it out a little bit later, but we just don't know. This is something, however, that data miners should be able to find, because they can actually figure out what variables are being tweaked, and so they will be able to report on that, and hopefully we'll have that at some point soon. A lot of the time, these patches get loaded into the game before they actually go live, and so I'd be keeping an eye on your favorite data miners and Blue Sky and Twitter. Maybe they have something to say about that. Okay, some main weapon changes. So NZAP paints the player's feet more easily. This doesn't strike me as a weapon that needed a lot of help with mobility. Mobility is certainly already a strength of it compared to literally any other cooler weapon in the game. So here's, like, that's already a decent amount of paint. I don't know if they're maybe increasing the frequency that it paints its own feet, because it is, look, like 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It does look like it's like 6 shots before it paints your feet in the cycle. So maybe that's something they're addressing. Maybe they're just making it so that it's more likely that it does land at your feet, that it happens every 3rd or 4th time instead of every 5th or 6th time. I mean, that'll be an improvement. It's also just not something that I think is making a difference right now. Maybe it slightly increases the amount that it paints for cooler by doing so, but otherwise, I don't think that's a big deal. L3 increased the speed of shots by approximately 5% and extended the flight distance. I believe that this is the same change that they had on a previous patch. I'm going to go double check that real quick. So this is patch 11.0 we're looking at now. They have already increased the speed of shots by 24% on a previous patch, but they did so without changing the flight distance. Now they're actually going to slightly increase the flight distance, so this is a range buff. So that might help a little bit. They keep wanting to make the L3 a fighting weapon, which is really strange to me. That's never how that weapon has been played. I guess maybe they just want a burst fire, that they want a burst rifle. They want something like the Halo battle rifle to be on this weapon, and that's just not how it's ever been performing. And so maybe they're trying to find a way to get it back into that state. I don't know what their plans are for it, but this is sort of the niche that they've been trying to force it into for a couple patches now. Luna, reduced scatter of shots while jumping. So this just makes them more accurate. Now, blasters. How specific are we being about blasters here? If this is just the vanilla blaster, that's one thing. If it's all of the blasters, that's another. Because one of the things that made this patch specifically favored like the custom blaster is that the vanilla blaster got a bigger buff, if I remember correctly, than a lot of other blasters. Like that radius is larger. They were not all made equal. Luna is still also a very strong option right now, and if they only buff it, with a lot of the blaster mains might just switch over to Luna or something. Clash, same changes with Luna. Undercover, reduce the amount of ink consumed. Good for them. Blaster, extended the time when movement is restricted after firing by 1 frame. That's definitely a significant nerf. A frame is a pretty light amount, but it's still going to matter. Because blasters already have a pretty punishing end lag after they fire. So that could mean something. Rapid Pro. Extended the amount of time it takes for ink to begin recovering by about 1/6 of a second. So just way more white ink frames. 1/6 of a second. Why do they need to go like 10 frames on them? That's nasty. I wasn't even seeing this get used that much, because a lot of the time people were just choosing to run the vanilla blaster, and then after that they wanted all of their backlines to be these heavy painting options. Like, why are we nerfing Rapid Pro? Were they seeing this in like tournaments? I'm gonna go and check the Area Cup standings and see if this was getting results that I don't think it was. So this was the most recent Area Cup. It's heavy, heavy, leader, pen, heavy, bow, pen, leader, bow, pen, backless. There's not a single Rapid Pro in this entire lineup. Why do they need to nerf it? Who's using that? Is it just getting used in other modes and we're not seeing it? I don't understand that one. Heavy. Oh, this is so needed. Oh, this is so needed. Decreased the radius inked by about 8%. Decreased the radius from point of impact by 8%. So radius inked by spray droplets and the radius of the ink splatter. That is possibly... the geometry of that is a little bit difficult to assess because I would need to know a little bit more about the coding of the game. And I would also need to kind of work the numbers out. But Heavy is painting about 20 to 25% more than any other weapon in the game right now. And so dropping it by about this much seems like it might be about proportional. Heavy, I made a video about it, has been getting used to paint spam for ever since the big change that it got, ever since the big buff that it got. Because all you gotta do, just to show this off one more time for those who aren't aware. Am I wearing enough special charge? Okay, I just need this. This is really more than enough to get this. So I am going to fire full charge. And I'm going to fire second full charge. So that's one way to get the special. What I could also do is just throw a single sprinkler and fire one full charge. So sprinkler goes here. And I already have special. Why is that significant? Why the fact that I can charge it that fast? Well, I can spam paint out as much as I want here. Kind of drain the tank dry. And you can see I'm painting an awful lot just on this one ink tank. And then I'm about to run out, I just throw this out there and start painting again. And as long as the area around me is getting counter-painted by the enemy team, which, like, it's going to have to with how much I'm putting out there. Look at all the space I already control. The enemy team is going to have to push in against this at some point. With whatever it is that I'm painting, I'm never actually having to drop down into the ink and refill. I always have a special ready to go to just refill the ink tank and keep painting. It's already a high paint weapon, and it just absolutely dumps this stuff out on the map once you start using that exploit. So people were using that to get the most absurd numbers, and that's not to say that it wasn't able to fight when it needed to. It was still difficult to rush this thing down. You still had to treat it like a backline, but if you didn't do something about it, the entire map turned the opposing team's color. There were people who were even doubling this up with pencil, because it put out so much paint between the two of them that the enemy team just couldn't really move very well, and it was too obvious trying to move in against them, too easy to mow someone down if they tried to run forward. So, this is a very deserved nerf. This is a very deserved nerf. These are probably, like, the two #1 things that someone would ask for in a patch. If you just wanted something immediate like that. So those are both very good ideas. I don't know about the rest of this, what effect that's going to have. I'm concerned about whether Luna gets any of these nerfs up here. I'm concerned for Rapid Pro being hit unnecessarily hard by this right here. This seems way out of line with what else I've been seeing from that weapon. But so far, pretty good. Trizuka, increased damage dealt to big bubblers. So this is a buff to Trizuka and a nerf to big bubbler. We have been seeing less and less Trizuka use over time. It's still out there occasionally, but it's definitely not super popular right now. And Big Bubbler was always a big counter to it. So this could be a good thing, but this is also something to watch out for in future patches if the meta shifts away, say, from Big Bubblers. But one other thing this is doing is nerfing the Vanilla Blaster, which has a Big Bubbler. So that might also be part of the incentive. Zipcaster, reduced the amount of ink consumed when zipping by approximately 33%. If I remember correctly, ink consumption is a variable that is tied to the duration of the special. You get to use this for longer if you use less ink. If I'm reading this correctly, this isn't just, this is basically a duration buff, and that's the only effect that it's going to have. So that's what I'm thinking it is. I don't think that this is what the Zipcaster necessarily needed, though what the Zipcaster might have needed is the buff to, or the nerf to blast radius, because that just makes it way too easy to shoot those things out of the sky. So maybe we're going to see slightly more Zipcaster. It's still in a rough spot. There's still a lot of weapons that can hit it out of the air with AoE that make it a little bit too hard to use for the value that you get. We'll see. Increased damage to big bubblers by direct shots and explosions. So same buff that they gave to Trizuka. It looks like they're just trying to target specifically the big bubbler with those two specials. Those two specials are also seeing a lot less use right now, so maybe giving them slightly more of a use case is part of the goal here. Booyah, decreased damage taken from Splatanas when the player has armor. So specifically Splatanas, which were really good at shredding Booyah bombs, are just getting targeted by this. This is a privilege that they've enjoyed for some time. I feel like this is poorly timed because Splatanas have not been seeing that much use recently. And Big Bubbler is the special on the Splatana that we were seeing the most of, which was the decav. So I guess maybe more people might go back to the vanilla stamper because they've got a little bit better of a Zipcaster right now, but it seems kind of rough to be a Splatana unless they get something else here. We'll see how it goes, though. Predictions are hard to make at this point. Splatter color screen, increased the device's range to enable it to be set up further away than before. Okay, so you aren't just going to throw this 10 feet and have it fall and land. You can chuck it a little bit further to activate it in other locations. So there might be some lineups that are possible now that weren't before. It might be something for screen users to experiment with. We still have a situation where some people are negatively impacted by this special, and so there will always be a toggle where if people aren't comfortable with playing against it, they can demand that their opponents not play with it, and that will always make it a little bit iffy whether or not you want to be trying to run this and play around it. Crab Tank decreased the effective radius of the cannon's explosions. They're nerfing Crab Tank. I have been seeing a slight uptick in Crab Tank usage since, the nerfs that finally ended Crab meta. But it's only been slight, and I don't know that this was actually that needed, based on what I've seen. There's been some Splattershot Pro, there's been some dualies, it's been a little bit more of Splash, but this is definitely going to keep that special down a little bit. Because the cannon's explosion, this was the best part of the crab tank, is those big explo shots you get. If you hit one of those and then just like a couple of the rapid fire shots, that would splat. And you'd always like open with throwing your bomb and hoping that did a chunk of damage, and then hitting the explo shot, hoping for that to combo, and if it didn't, you'd fire a couple shots, hoping that comboed. So the explosion was always a part of that damage combo that you were going for. And now it's still, you know, that central part of the kit, but that's the part that's getting nerfed. So that's a big hit to especially like Splash and Dualies players. My perception of how the game has been played does not align with this being necessary right now. Not that it's like a terrible thing to nerf, because that is part of what made that special so oppressive, but I'm also just wondering, like, okay, what kind of identity is it going to have if they knock it down this far? So we'll see. So buffing new Squiffer, buffing Sniper Rider 5B from 210 to 200. This is Inkstorm. People are not working to spam this special right now, and it's going to need some kind of rework before people are going to look into that too hard. Slosher Deco getting a lot more zip casters, which again has not been the problem. The problem has been whether you can survive in the zip caster. Heavy Edit Nouveau. So you're going to get more crab tanks. They're just going to be worse. Custom Well String. I'm blanking. Is this the one that has hammer, or I'm going to go look it up real quick. The custom one is the one that has Wave Breaker. So, I mean, yeah, you're going to get more of them. Cool. Are we going to see Paint Spam Wellstring now? Are we going to see it trying to... How fast does this thing get special? Is that a thing you can do? I guess it's possible. I wouldn't say that this is, like, the strongest painting weapon in the world, but it could make it so you can cycle your ink tanks a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. 52. Oh, they're nerfing literally the weakest part of the kit. I'm not super worried about this, to be honest. I think that the 52 is still going to be the foremost shooter based on what I've seen so far, even in spite of this nerf. Luno Neo getting a slight nerf to its hammer output, which is probably fair. This has been a pretty powerful weapon so far. It definitely needed something if it's not seeing as much of the blast radius reduction. Dynamo is getting a nerf to its cooler output, which is only going to incentivize using pencil more. Pencil players, you are still not out of a job here. So, heavy is worse. Dynamo is worse. These are multiple of the weapons that you're considering as a backline player or as a cooler support for a team. So that's only going to push people back to the pencil. And I think a lot of people are tired of the pencil and would prefer to play other things. If talking to my own teammates is anything to bring up. Gold Dynamo, what? Why are they nerfing the Chumps output? Give it more. Screw it. Nobody's picking that thing. That's a weird one to me. Maybe there's some bizarre double chump comp that we're seeing somewhere, but that's something that you would try to run in zones, and that's not something we're seeing there. Why would you nerf that weapon? Slosher, they're nerfing its special output. Slosher is one of the stronger weapons in the game right now. I think this is kind of valid. Just so many bombs and strikes, so hard to avoid taking damage anywhere you stand on the map against the Slosher. And, so I'm totally fine with that. I'm also totally fine with Dreadringer getting a slight nerf, even though it's fallen out of favor a little bit. Just you use this thing to spam a lot of Reef Sliders, and taking a little bit of a hit in that regard is fine, because it's still a fairly strong main weapon, paints pretty well. And especially since Blaster itself came down a peg in this patch, people are going to start looking back at Dread like, hey, is this the AoE option that we want? And I think that taking it down in advance of that is not a bad play. Regarding the process where a player disconnecting immediately after the start of a battle triggers no contest, shortened the period considered to be immediately after the start of a battle. Or, sorry, it'll let the game go on under more circumstances now. Does it say to what? Because I think it was, like, in the first minute. What is it now? I wish it would say. Like, a minute is a pretty clear and obvious amount of time. Like, how many seconds is it now? Changes to X. Changed the systems for team division to reduce the likelihood of weapons with similar preferred ranges being concentrated on the same team. Okay, so this is... They're trying to cut down on, say, for example, having 2 E-leaders and a Hydra on one team. So we're trying to spread it out so you're more likely to just have one anchor. This could be a really good change if it works. But we don't know exactly how they're planning on doing it. So we'll just have to see kind of how it feels when we get in there. Next update, we'll focus on changes to multiplayer balance. Okay, so we know that the next one is also going to be a balance patch. All right, overall, they did the big things that they needed to, and these things are going to shake the metagame up pretty significantly. Blaster being nerfed, if that nerf is effective, will completely shake up the front line. Heavy's paint output is deservedly nerfed and will also drastically change the team makeup of a lot of teams. This is something that it's going to be hard to predict because those two pieces are going to change what people want to run. And so I'm excited to see what developments are going to happen, but I also can't foresee exactly what impact that's going to have in the long term. Hope you guys are looking forward to the patch. I certainly am. I think it's going to shake things up quite a bit. We'll see you when we learn a little bit more, and maybe we have a little bit more to talk about and what's developing.